The Rule of St. Benedict. St. Benedict of Nursia was born in around 480 AD. One of the principal sources for information about his life is a work by Pope Gregory the Great, written in the early 590s, half a century or so after Benedict's death. By that time, the Rule was already a respected document. It would go on to exert an enormous influence on the shape of Western Christendom in the medieval period and beyond. The era in which Benedict lived was one of upheaval. Following the sack of Rome in 410 AD, the Western Roman Empire began to disintegrate. Around the time of Benedict's birth, the last emperor was finally deposed. He came of age in a period of decline, in a place besieged by enemies, internal strife, and economic troubles. Christianity had become the dominant religion during the time of empire, but the Church was still in the process of defining its practices, structures, and doctrines. Benedict was from a wealthy family in the Umbrian province of Nursia. As a youth, he travelled to Rome for an education in the liberal arts. But once there, he became dismayed by the dissolute lives of his teachers and fellow students. Resolving to give up his wealth and prospects in service of God, he left the city behind. He travelled east, eventually to Subiaco, about 40 miles from Rome. There Benedict began living as a solitary, in a cave on a hillside, overlooking the ruins of Nero's palace. A neighbouring monk, Romanus, brought him all he needed, using a rope to lower bread over the cliff face above the cave so that he could have something to eat. After a time, Benedict's whereabouts became known more generally, and he developed a reputation for holiness. According to Gregory's account, this led the monks of a nearby abbey to ask Benedict to become their new abbot. Although reluctant to begin with, their persistence won him over. However, before long, the disciplined mode of life he tried to install brought him into conflict with the community. They resolved that he should be killed. In one of many miracles described by Gregory, a poisoned goblet was given to Benedict, who made the customary sign of the cross over it, causing the glass to shatter. Realizing what had happened, Benedict returned once more to the wilderness. He drew enough followers to establish a dozen small monasteries in the surrounding hills. After several years, in about 529, he took some of his most devoted followers to found the great monastery of Monte Cassino. It was here, in this last period of his life, that he set down what would become known as the Rule of St. Benedict. To begin with, it was one of a number of documents those looking to organize monastic communities might draw upon. But over the following centuries, Benedict's became the standard form of monastic life across the Latin West, and Benedict himself became known as the father of Western monasticism. Benedictines brought Christianity to much of Europe, and their monasteries grew into vast centres for civilization, a far cry from the relatively small communities of Benedict's own day. They accumulated books, relics, and works of art. They drew to their enclosures the ill, infirm, and pilgrims from every walk of life. They also grew in wealth, power, and influence. By 1200, across the continent, well over 1,000 monastic houses were governed according to the rule of St. Benedict. Many monks and nuns still live in this manner 1,500 years later. The Rule is a guide to life in 73 chapters. To modern readers, it can seem exacting, but one of the reasons it has been successful is due to the spirit of moderation it exhibits. Earlier monastic traditions often emphasized extreme ascetic practices, such as prolonged fasting, self-flagellation, and living in isolation for extended periods. Benedict speaks of these other rules with reverence, but he is a realist through and through. His rule is intended as an encouraging, sustainable, and practical guide for those embarking on a monastic life. The rule sets out a theory of the good life, and since Benedict's concern is of such general interest, he's achieved far more than he set out to. People from all walks of life have benefited from meditating on his ideas about freedom and authority, stability and change, leadership, community, accountability, flexibility, work, worship, and more besides. All Benedictine monks are required to take 3 vows: of stability, conversion to monastic life, and obedience. Stability commits an individual to a specific community, rooting one's search for God in the daily realities of shared life. This vow serves as a foundation for the next, fidelity to the monastic life, which encompasses a commitment to the ongoing process of spiritual transformation and personal refinement. This dynamic pursuit finds its direction in the vow of obedience, which is about attentive listening and submission to God, community, and one's superiors. The rule adds flesh to these bones. Benedict invites us into the text in his prologue and provides a roadmap for spiritual development.